it was a pretty bleak world until the web really started to take hold. And people started accepting web applications both inside the enterprise and in the consumer end. And I think that it's something that people forget how painful it was to ship software before the internet, before the browser. And even now, we're trying to change what the browser is so it can do more and more desktop-like things. But it's also worth remembering why the browser succeeded. There was no group of people saying, I think what we're going to do is we're going to ship a browser and everyone's going to use it. It didn't happen that way. In fact, there were people who were basically actively agitating against bringing in these crazy browser things into companies, and only really the incredible productivity gains and incredible usefulness of the browser made it possible. It was so powerful it overcame any resistance that was out there. And it did that because it was built on top of this world of open standards and open source. If you look at the rise of open source, you see that it mirrors the rise of the internet, and vice versa. I personally believe that one could not have happened without the other. And through that, its ubiquity became solid and became what we aim for. This is a funny sort of chart we've got here. Those lines along the top are meant to represent the user interfaces of the desktop applications and desktop operating systems like Windows and OS X, and how the web browser is trying to sort of ape these client functionalities. And if you look 10 years ago, right, that was when the XML HTTP request technology was debuted. So basically, you could have written Google Maps 10 years ago. You could have written a Gmail-like application 10 years ago. It would have been a little slow on that hardware, but you could have done it. So why did it take so long for us to get to the place where we are today with AJAX applications? Why does it take us so long to adopt these technologies? And yet, if you think 10 years ago how people developed, they were beginning to develop these very Web 1.0, although I'm not really a big fan of the Web 1.0, 2.0 sort of words. They were doing these very basic applications, and even those were taking the world by storm. So what we're trying to do at Google is we're trying to say, well, listen, this web thing, it's pretty important. It's where we live, it's where we make our money, and it's where we think technology is going. Shocker, right? Can you believe Google feels that way? But how do we bring more desktop-like performance into these web apps? And that's when we started thinking about things like Google Gears, Google Chrome, and some of these other technologies that I'm going to talk about today. So the other problem is, when you create a web application, how do you deploy it in such a way that a lot of people can take advantage of it? There was a time not so long ago that if everybody in this room went to one website, that website would go down. That doesn't happen as much anymore, but it doesn't take much more than the people in this room to bring down a common website. And that's pretty remarkable, considering how many people there are in the world that are using the internet. So I used to work for, how many of you have ever surfed Slashdot? Just raise your hand if you have. So it's a website, there used to be a term called slashdotting. You don't hear it as much anymore. But it would point at a website, it was very popular, all those people would go to that website and the website would fall over. Right? So how can we at Google, where we've invested tons of resources into creating an enormous infrastructure for search, for ads, and for our applications, how do we loan that out to you? So we're going to talk about that today. Finally, how many of you own a mobile phone? That's a stupid question. It's pandering to the audience, I know. How many of you don't own a mobile phone, I guess is a better question. I don't think I see a single hand. It turns out there's just about 3 times as many mobile phone users as there are computer users, depending on whose numbers you buy, right? Or pay attention to. So with that in mind, how do we affect change in the mobile world so that it doesn't end up becoming stagnant and stultifying for developers? And this is about developers. I mean, there are other strategic reasons that we'll do things like Android and Gears and Chrome. But I want today to focus on you, people who are basically writing the programs that the world will use going forward. And finally, why are we doing this? Why are we doing this at all? Google's a funny company. You think, well, wait a second, most companies, when they try to sell to developers, as it were, when they market to developers, they're doing it because they want those developers to adopt their platforms, and then they make direct money from selling the platform to end users, right? You see this with Microsoft, you see this with Sun, you see this with a lot of people. And this is a very legitimate business to be in. I'm not coming down on it. We have a little different perspective, though. As I mentioned before, Google lives on the internet. This is where we came from. This is how we grow. with open standards, open source in the internet, Google has been able to create Google. We've been able to create the search products, the ad products, the apps. And we think that's incredibly important. We think that that can only happen on a free, fair, and open internet. And so this is why you see us doing things like our work around network neutrality in the States, our work around patent reform, our work around maintaining standards like HTML5, which are reflective of this open internet ethic. But also, if we can help other people develop on the internet, then we can also advance as a company. It's not hyperbole to say that as the internet gets better, so does Google. And as the internet gets bigger, so does Google. And that's not a bad thing or an evil thing. I mean, we talk about evil a lot at Google. It's actually a really good thing. Because if we create an open, free, fair, and terrific internet experience for users, if you make those experiences, it's good for all of us. It makes it possible for all of us to make the internet a better place. And frankly, I personally have this great gratitude towards open source and open standards and this internet because it doesn't just make my career. It makes for a cerebral life of a coder possible, right? I mean, before the internet really came to the fore, it was getting pretty crappy to be a developer. I wish there's a nicer way to say that. It was not great being a developer, having to code using these incredibly large client-server frameworks. But with the internet, we can go after more people, have more customers, have more clients, have more fans of our work. And just the ability of getting our work out there is an incredibly powerful thing for me and for Google. So that's why we're doing this. There's very good economic reasons, but it's also because this is where we're from as a company. So how do we make that client more powerful? There's a lot of things we're going to talk about today, but I'm going to start by pointing out where we've been. So on the left there is Amazon.com in 1995. So how many of you visited the site back then? The one or two of you, yeah. Not many people did because it was a pretty crappy site back then. But you could still order a book or two, and that was pretty exciting. Back then, that was enough, right? You'll notice they didn't use much in the way of tables, but they did indent things. Indenting was a big advance back then, as was linking. And that image on the left, people are like, wow, you can put images in web pages, rock on, And then if you fast forward a number of years, how many of you remember the first time you used Google Maps with the clicking and the dragging and everything? It was one of those gasp-worthy moments. You're like, wow, browsers can do that? No. I remember when I first got to Google, we hadn't launched Maps yet to the outside world. And somebody showed me this. They're like, oh, you got to see this, you got to see this. And I'm like, okay. And so I go and I checked it out. I was like, is this some freaky plugin you're using? Like, you're going to expect people to download? They're like, no, it's just JavaScript. I'm like, no, come on. That's crazy. You're lying to me. They're like, no, seriously, it's really something. And I was like, really? And then later on, by mixing in Flash and Street View, and you're watching people turn around, and it's almost like magic. But through these open interfaces, open programming models, we're able to do things like this. So how do we make that better? To talk to you about that, my friend Ian Fetty is going to talk to you. Ian?
Thank you, Chris.
Here you go.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for coming. It's an honor to be here and to be able to talk to you about Google Chrome. My name is Ian Fetty. I'm one of the product managers on Google Chrome, and I'm very glad to be here today to be able to talk to you. I want to switch over to Google Chrome now and show you what we have done at Google in the browser space. When we made Google Chrome, we had three prime engineering directives that we wanted to accomplish. We wanted to focus on speed, we wanted to focus on stability, and we wanted to focus on security. And we wanted to accomplish all of this while maintaining a streamlined user interface. And I think we've done that. So here, I have Google Chrome. And what you see here is, right off the bat, you notice that the browser itself takes much less space. We feel that the real important part is the web page. It's the content and applications that you all are creating that's important. So we make the browser smaller to get out of the way so that we can focus on content and not Chrome. But what about speed? Let's talk about speed. I spend most of my day in the browser. I do my email in the browser, I search from the browser, I do my word processing in the browser, and so I want everything to be fast. I want to do my jobs quicker. So what do? Well, I search a lot. So we want to make searching fast. So in our address bar, you can both type URLs and do searches all in one place. So let's say I want to do a search for soccer videos. I can type soccer videos, and if I just hit enter right now, I'm going to do a search for soccer videos. But you see, I also get suggestions for other things I might want to search for, like soccer videos on YouTube, or a website that has soccer videos. You see that I also have this whole area here where there are 9 pictures. These pictures are thumbnails from the sites I visit frequently. This is an accurate representation of my day as a user of a web browser. You see, I spend a lot of time on iGoogle doing searches. I spend time in my email. I spend time in the Chromium project, Chromium being the open source project where we have released all of the source code for Google Chrome. I spend time in my calendar. And so whenever I open a new tab or I open the browser, it's very quick for me to go where I want to go. I can do the things I do quickly. So let's do this search now for soccer videos. And actually, let's try one of those. Let's go to YouTube. And so you'll see here I'm getting a suggestion for youtube.com. So let's do that. And I don't see any soccer, but this one looks interesting. So perhaps not, but let's talk about stability. I often have a... Great. Well, there is some soccer. I often have a lot of things going on. I've got some YouTube videos playing. I've got my mail in another tab. So let's open up another tab. Whoops. So let's open up another tab. Maybe I have iGoogle in the background. So I've got a lot of things going on. And in other browsers, when something goes wrong, maybe a plugin crashes, maybe there's some script on the page that crashes the browser, the entire browser goes down. As we do more and more in our browser, and as our browser becomes more important as a platform, we think stability is increasingly more important. So let me show you one of the cool things about Google Chrome. I'm going to simulate a crash of the Flash plugin. So I'm going to bring up the Google Chrome Task Manager. And you'll see here that I've actually got multiple processes running. I've got a process for the browser. I've got a process for the YouTube tab. I've got a process for the iGoogle tab. And I've got a process for the Flash plugin. I'm going to simulate the Flash plugin crashing by ending the process. And you'll see that although that process has died, the web browser is still up. I get a notification that the plugin has crashed and the video has gone away, but the page itself I can still interact with, I can still read it. My iGoogle tab is still up. And if I click refresh, everything is going to come back. I'm going to be exactly where I was. So let me just show you one other feature before I hand it back to Chris. I want to show you one of the cool things that Google Chrome offers for developers. You'll see right now that I'm actually logged into iGoogle. You can see I'm logged in, I'm recognized, this is my personal page. A lot of you are writing applications that require you to log in as well. And it's sometimes difficult to test these applications and be logged in multiple profiles. So maybe you want to log in as an administrator so you can do some debugging, and you also want to be logged in as a user at the same time. But because you only have a single cookie store, this becomes very difficult. In Google Chrome, you can actually open what we call an incognito window. And what this gives you is a window with a brand new cookie store. So none of the cookies from Google Chrome are imported into this window. You start off fresh, and when you close this window, all the cookies go away. So if I go to Google, you'll see that Google will actually come up, and I will not be logged in. My internet access seems a bit slow. There we go. So here I am. I've got a separate window, separate cookie store, so it actually makes it a lot easier to debug applications where I want to log in multiple times. So these are just a few of the features of Google Chrome. I'm going to be talking a bit more later in the afternoon. I think it's at 1 o'clock, give or take, 1:20. So with that, I'm going to hand it back to Chris. Thank you very much. I should also mention, for those of you who have seen the Google comic, you should look under your seat now. A few of you are actually going to find a copy of the comic under your seat. So take a quick look.
Did anyone find them? I always wonder, a friend of mine, Andy Rubin, the guy in charge of the Android project, there's one. The first thing he does when he enters a conference room is he reaches under his chair to see if anything's being given away. And he'll bend over and look at things. He's sort of a gadget hound, though. So thank you, Ian. One of the other things that we worked on to make the web better is Google Gears. We started doing this a couple of years ago, and it offers some really interesting things for web developers to take advantage of. One of the things that always frustrated me about the internet and about web programming was that often you were sort of locking yourself into this cooperative multitasking model on that one web page. But actually somebody at Google did something about this. So I'm going to bring up a little window here. So the thing I'm going to show off right now is something called Worker Pool within Gears. Gears offers you a lot of different services. It basically allows you to create offline web applications. It allows you to store more data on the client side. But it also gives this really cool facility called Worker Pools. Now, Dion, in his talk, is going to talk about Gears in depth, so I don't want to go too far into it. But I really wanted to show this to you. So first of all, this is me interacting with the UI. You'll notice it just changes the background color from white to gray, beige, off-white, ecru, whatever. And when I click this button here, it's going to go through 250,000 row inserts into its local SQL database, and then it's going to remove those lines. So that takes a few moments, takes about 2 seconds. And while that's happening, so I'm going to load in 10 of those. You notice that it's so now I can do it. Now that it's done with those things, I can do something else. But if I hit this routine, the reactivity, the responsiveness of the application goes away because it's too busy doing something, right? So we knew that if we shipped a system where that was a possibility, that it would make for a very bad user experience. And so how could we fix that? So we made it possible for you to take advantage of the thread architecture and the process architecture of chips that have been around for 15, 20 years now, right? Multi-threaded applications are nothing new, but on the web, they are, right? So we made it possible, so I just started 10 or 12 of those. And meanwhile, I can click like crazy while they're happening. So this is the kind of thing that we're trying to do. We're trying to bring more functionality to the web browser. And like Chrome, Gears is open source. It's been implemented across a variety of browsers now, including Safari, Chrome, obviously, Firefox. There's an IE plugin. And you've started seeing it show up in places like Opera and a variety of mobile browsers as well. So that's pretty exciting because it'll bring the offline web to a lot of those devices. So that's Google Gears. So we just released recently some new functions in Google Gears that, again, just bothered us, right? There are certain things about the internet when you program it a lot that you really just get frustrated with. How many of you have had to implement a file uploading interface on a website? So this is pretty much universally the suckiest thing that you can have to program. So we're like, is there any way we can make this any better? And so, for instance, if you try to upload videos to YouTube and you have the Gears plugin installed, you'll see this really great way of uploading videos now and uploading files. It's really easy for developers to take advantage of. So it gives you that kind of functionality. We introduced a geolocation API. And whether you're coming from, just a static IP address or DHCP address from your internet provider, whether you're on a mobile phone that supports Gears, this will give you its best approximation of where you are, whether through GPS readouts, from cell tower identifications, or from the IP address that you're coming from. So, and also another really frustrating thing, how many of you have tried to, when you're uploading things, say into Gmail or into any application, you're like, okay, what's happening right now? You have no way of knowing how far along your document is in the uploading process, for instance. Well, we wanted to have a way of having the progress be shown. And so Gears now offers this on progress event. These are just like these fundamental things that are just so frustrating about the web. You're like, why can't I just do this? Well, it's because it needs more functionality on the client to do it. And so that's what we're trying to do with Gears, and then with Chrome as well. But Gears is open to everybody, and it's open to every browser. So take a look at that. And that's also licensed under the BSD license. So you can use that without fear of some nefariousness, So yeah. So the next step was thinking about the cloud. How does Google bring the functionality of our infrastructure to the developers? There's a couple of ways we do this, really 3 ways. The first is by providing really rich APIs to you, the developer. Now, using Google Data. Google Data is just a fancy way of saying the Atom Publishing Protocol, which is an open standard. to access Google properties. Whether it's YouTube, News, Google Notebook, Health, whatever matters to you at Google, you have a way of accessing that programmatically from your programs. And this is independent of the web. You can just do this from your applications. Now, for your websites, though, we said, okay, sometimes programming all that G-data stuff can be kind of a hassle, and more than it needs to be. Why are people re-implementing and re-implementing and re-implementing these things when we can offer them something that just slides right into their web page? One of the greatest things about Google Maps and the API is with one script tag, you can add an enormous amount of functionality to your websites. So we wanted to do that too with things like Google Search, and things like YouTube, things like News. And you don't realize this, but these APIs now are serving something like 1 billion hits a day, which is a significant number. This means that every single one of these guys is shipping out on average to everybody on the internet every day through sites that are just including news feeds, that are using our Ajax search APIs to feed RSS, and through a lot of other ways. So that's pretty exciting to us. So that's great. So this is a way for your websites, for your programs to take advantage of Google. But what about you running your programs on our infrastructure? So how do we do that? So we thought, okay, this is actually a pretty big problem. Deploying a piece of software on the internet seems like a pretty simple thing, and it is, until you get popular. So deploying something terrible is easy because nobody uses it, right? Or deploying something with a very small audience can be very easy to do because you don't have to worry too much about more than, say, 3 users. But if you're going to be deploying to a lot of people, if I wanted to deploy an application that all of you would find useful, how do I do that, right? Well, I've been an open source developer now going on 12, 13 years. Since 96 or something like that, so you can do the math. As we thought to ourselves, okay, well, what do people need? Well, they need a real programming language, right? They don't need something made up. We didn't want to create another Cold Fusion or another thing like that, so we decided to go with Python. Python is one of the 3 top languages at the company, so we use Python, Java, and C++ at Google almost exclusively on our production servers. And so combined with the fact that Guido was on the team, Guido van Rossum, the creator of Python, was on the team, we decided to go with Python. And we thought, well, what do people actually need from this? They need a really nicely integrated development environment. They need basically the space to work. And that's where the 5 million free page views comes from. So if you have a site that you think is going to get less than 5 million page views a month, which is actually a lot, then this is a great place to start. And then we're going to start having a fee for stuff over that. But right now, it's all free. And if you think you're going to use more than 5 million page views, just let us know so it doesn't shut off on you. And I've seen people do this. It's pretty cool. So here's the thing. So you're going to launch an app. Normally, this is what you're going to do. You're going to load your favorite version of Ubuntu or Debian or whatever version of Linux you favor. You're going to have Apache, you're going to have MySQL, and you're going to have PHP. You're going to configure all those, and you're going to ship it out. And you're going to be like, wow, this is going okay. And it does. You can use Perl, you can use Python, whatever is your favorite language. C++. You can code your CGIs in C. And that's pretty terrific. And then you're like, well, wait a second. I'm growing a lot now. I need to worry about a lot more things. My database isn't as fast as I want it to be. I need to start tweaking the indexes, over and over and over again. Before I started at Google, I would go into people's companies and I would see their appalling SQL schemas. Sites that are getting 1 million, 2 million hits a day, and they didn't even have a single index. So everything was a full text crawl. I couldn't believe it. But it wasn't that those people were ignorant or stupid. It was just they had grown faster than they were anticipating. And so as you're growing, you're like, I meant to fix that, I just didn't get a chance to do it, right? So you start doing things. You have to start worrying about logs. You have to start worrying about monitoring. You have to go out and buy machines. When was the last time any of you bought a computer? It takes a little while, and it costs money, And so it takes a box of cash, Although, really, that's sort of a joke. Because you have to have a cash front end. So we were like, hey, cash, haha. It was very funny, I assure you. And you have to provision all this stuff. And this takes a lot of work. So we're like, well, how can we help people with this? Google's already done all this. We've done this for search and ads, which is an enormous problem. And so we had excess capacity. How could we basically even out our capacity while offering that infrastructure for your use? And then, as you grow even further, you start worrying about all kinds of other things. Are your databases falling over your machines? I don't know who this guy is, but he looks pretty unhappy. So how are we going to help? I don't know that I really buy this whole cardboard box metaphor because I've never seen GE ship an engine in a cardboard box, but But we decided to put it all in a box for you and say, listen, here's what you can do. If you just write your application in Python, paying attention to a few different quirks that comes from running on our infrastructure, then you're going to have the ability to scale from 0 to 5 million users almost instantly. And we had a couple applications that did exactly this. So this one is just a fun application called Wordle. If you go to wordle.net, you'll see it. It just runs on Google's infrastructure, and you can make these sort of word clouds, which is fun. So I did one from the Munich entry in Wikipedia. So it sort of grades all your words on how often they're said and that kind of thing. So apparently the Olympics were important, and so was Munich in that article. So one of the most popular iPhone applications called Now Playing. It's a web app. It's also hosted on Google App Engine. So this gets an absurd number of page views a day and uses a ton of different interfaces to do it. So every time you're using this, you're basically using Google's infrastructure, but there's nothing to make you think that this is a Google product, because it's not. It's your product, or theirs, unless there's somebody from Now Playing in the audience, which I think would be really weird. Similarly, you've got these apps that people write, and if they write to the right kind of interfaces, it can truly scale, and it can scale very, very quickly. So PixChat was written for the High Five sandbox, which is part of OpenSocial, which Patrick is going to talk about in a few moments. So I don't want to talk too much about that. But people are able to basically deploy these apps and combine it with OpenSocial, which brings a lot of users very quickly, and it scales with the problem. And that's an incredibly freeing thing as a developer, to not have to worry about it. I've had to run sites that were very popular, and I have to admit it's not one of my favorite things. And Google's already done it, so I'm happy to have Google do it. But we're at Google Developer Day. I guess you're not so surprised to hear that. Patrick's going to talk about all these, so I don't want to go too far into that. So I'm going to do something that every one of my co-speakers are like, you're going to do what? So this is what it looks like when you're programming. How many of you had to program a mobile application? Just raise your hand. This is probably one of the suckiest things in the whole world to have to do. It really is terrible. I mean, you've got all these different JVMs, write once, write everywhere, or something like that. And you've got all these vendors, you've got all these restrictions, you've got all these clearance bodies, you've got people who are going to certify your app, and it's just, at the end, it just doesn't look like programming anymore. It looks like pain. Right? And we knew this. We developed for all these applications. We've got some great apps out there for mobile phones, but gosh, it just isn't as fun as it could be. Right? And it's pretty funny when a platform makes you pine for writing for the desktop. Right? And it makes you want, programming for Sun was so much easier than this. When you start thinking that way, you should really and I don't mean to slag on Sun. I mean, I'm trying to show a difference here. It's not fun programming for phones. And so we thought, well, how could we fix that? Right? And we rapidly realized that the answer to our problems developing for mobile phones was to create our own mobile phone operating system and give it away to the world. Again, an absurd sort of response maybe. Oh, well, I'm not getting what I want. I'll just do a whole new operating system. But in the end, it is the right answer, we feel. And so we started working on Android. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you the basic Hello World application in Eclipse. And this is funny because my co-presenters are like, you're going to bring Eclipse and actually program in front of the entire crowd. I'm like, yeah, I am. And they also know how new I am at Eclipse. I'm a very noob programmer on Eclipse. But here's the basic Hello World application that ships with the Android Development Kit. You can install Eclipse in the Android Development Kit, depending on how fast your internet connection is, in about 15 minutes. And if you just follow the instructions, you're going to be doing exactly what I did a week and a half ago. So you're going to start a new Android project. We're going to call it Hello Munich, or Oktoberfest. Great project from an existing source. We're going to pick the Hello activity. So there are activities and intents inside the operating system. The program I'm actually writing for fun is one that basically ties into the free fall sensor. And so if you drop your phone, it calls the program, and the program screams in pain. So that's what I'm writing right now, but I didn't want to demonstrate that because I'd have to wing phones around, and and everyone in the team's like, wait, you're writing an app that will make people break their phone? That's pretty evil. And I'm like, yeah, okay. So I'm basing it on the Hello activity. So we'll click on Finish here, and it assembles the project. And then you go over here, and you hit Run as an Android application. You can run the applet. You can run your tests at this point. I'm actually not a great Eclipse guy, so I don't want to put on airs here that I know what I'm doing. And then you're going to hit OK. And then it's going to go through. It's going to build it. I'll expand some of these things while it's doing that. And then over on this fella here, this is an emulator. We're going to have some more in the wrap-up, so I'm not going to go too far into Android technology. And Michael Jennings has a talk. It's at, what time, 3 o'clock?
Well, in 5 minutes, it's supposed to be.
Oh my gosh, really?
And another one at around 4.
Yeah, so we have a couple of Android talks, so I won't go too far into it. So there's Hello World. That's all very exciting. And then we'll do Hello Oktoberfest. Am I spelling it wrong? I'm spelling it wrong. Right? Yeah, and then we're going to save that. I have no idea what I just did. We're going to save that. And then we're going to run it again. And it's going to reach into the emulator, close the old application, stop debugging it, and kick it up on there. So you can iterate very, very quickly using this system. And I think that's a really great thing. So we're sort of pressed for time, so I'm going to keep going here. And we're going to go, this is Google Web Toolkit. There's a great talk on Google Web Toolkit in the conference. So the other thing I want to stress is that Google Web Toolkit basically makes it possible for you to take your Java programs and run them within the browser and do exciting things with them there. And the real thing to remember here is that the unfun part of developing for the web is making sure that it works for not IE or not Firefox or not Chrome or not Safari. You know, finding browser compatibility is very, very tricky. So we wanted to ease that pain, not just for Googlers, but for everybody. And that's what Google Web Toolkit is about. And it's about doing it very, very fast. When you go into his talks, Amit's talk, you realize just how fast it is and how possible it is to create high-performance web applications using Google Web Toolkit. So if you're a Java person, I would totally recommend checking that out. And now Patrick is going to talk for 3 minutes, because we're really tight, about Open Social. Patrick?
Thanks, Chris. That will be a short one. So Guten Tag, Freunde. That's approximately the extent of my German. I'm Patrick Chanezon. I'm a developer advocate with Google and specialized on Open Social. I'm going to tell you a little bit about it. We have a session about Open Social this afternoon and some code labs, so I really recommend you to come to these to learn more. Essentially, the web is becoming social, and Open Social is a standard to allow you to create social applications, which means applications that take advantage of your list of friends and profile information that you're storing on social sites. And before I go further, I'd like to know who among you is at least on one social network, managing your list of friends there. Yeah, that's approximately at like 70% of people. And so today, if you wanted to socialize an object like a picture, like Flickr did 5 years ago, there's no way I'm going to go to a new site like this and invite all my friends and create yet a new profile. So in order to socialize objects today, without recreating a whole social network, the way to do this is to leverage existing social networks where people manage these relationships and do that through APIs. So the way you do that is through a common API that we call Open Social. There are many social sites who are involved in Open Social. A few of them, European ones, will be there today in our session, and especially there are 2 German ones, Xing and Locallisten, and there will be Viadeo, who is based in France, and Netlog, which is Europe-wide. Open Social is an open standard. It belongs to the Open Social Foundation, so anybody can participate into elaborating the standard. And it has been adopted really widely in the past year that it has been elaborated. Since last April, we went from a few million users on MySpace initially to a reach in terms of user of 375 million today. And it's still going to grow because companies like Yahoo and AOL have said they were interested in shipping Open Social. So if you're a developer today and you have an idea about an interesting object to socialize or an interesting social app to build, Open Social is really the first platform you should take a look at. And it's open source for sites who want to implement it. There's an open source reference implementation, actually production implementation for the server, which is called Shindig and is hosted at Apache. If you want to learn more, just come to our session. Thanks, Chris. Thanks.
So that's about it. You've got a lot to do today, and I hope you really enjoy the conference. And thank you for helping us make the internet better, and let us help you. That's it. Thank you.